Do they really think I'm some pushover of an original wife? Sorry, but I transmigrated here. If you can't tolerate her, you're being petty and jealous. Su Wanning, the matriarch of my Lu family, cannot be a jealous woman. My husband in name only, Lu Yan, finally spoke up. His voice wasn't loud, yet it was like an ice-tempered hammer, smashing down on the top of my skull, with a buzz even that blue and white porcelain vase from the previous dynasty, before my eyes blurred into double images. I didn't look at him. My nails were digging hard into my palm. That sharp sting of pain was the only reality I could hold on to in this absurd world. The air was thick with the scent of premium sandalwood, heavy and oppressive, as if it wanted to smoke one's soul away along with it. And mixed within this fragrance was another scent, Zan, coming from the woman kneeling at my feet. That delicate, pitiable sweetness of someone too frail to withstand the wind. Liu Yi. She was crying like a pear blossom bathed in rain, her shoulders heaving, as if a gust of wind could knock her over. That palm-sized little face was buried in her folded arms, her voice muffled and desperate, mixed with suppressed sobs and pleas. Sister, I beg you. It is all Yi's fault. It has nothing to do with the Duke. If you must punish someone, just punish Yi alone. Every sister was like an embroidery needle, not piercing deep but dense and numerous, stabbing into your flesh, making you irritated, giving you no peace. And beside her, the grand madam seated high upon the rosewood chair. My mother-in-law, the string of glossy Buddhist beads in her hand clicked with a clack, then stopped. The one in Yi's belly is the eldest grandson of our Lu family. This is a matter of utmost importance. Her voice was even colder, like a frozen lake in winter, without a single ripple, yet chilling to the bone. She couldn't even be bothered to look at me properly, her gaze passing over my head, cast toward some point in the void, as if proclaiming an unquestionable truth. A daughter of a convicted official had no right to enter the doors of our Duke of Zhengguo's manor. But since she is with child, it is heaven's will. Give her a title, keep her in the manor, and it will fulfill Yanner's affections while showing your magnanimity. Every word was laced with the poison of charity. I finally raised my head, my gaze slowly sweeping across these three faces. Liu Yi's cries were mournful, yet the corner of her eye quietly cracked open, stealing a quick glance at me, hiding a trace of smugness she couldn't quite conceal in time. The grand madam's face was as still as water, her brows bearing the indifference of long-accumulated authority, as if I wasn't her daughter-in-law, but merely an object that needed to be disciplined. Finally my gaze fell upon Lu Yan, the Duke of Zhengguo, my husband. He wore an ink-black brocade robe, his hair bound with a jade crown, handsome as a meticulously painted portrait. But those eyes that once promised me one life, one world, just the two of us, were now wavering, refusing to meet my gaze. His brows were tightly furrowed, not from guilt, but from impatience. On his face, I saw that self-righteous arrogance, saw the irritation at being disturbed by my failure to know my place. So it turns out, when a man's heart changes, even breathing becomes a sin. I laughed inside. Su Wanning, oh Su Wanning, how pitiful you are. For this man, you defied your parents, refused more prestigious marriage proposals thinking you had married for love. And the result? You're nothing but a canary he keeps in a cage, and when he brings home another sparrow, you're expected to nod and thank him, to be endlessly grateful. But I am Su Wanning, a 30-year-old top lawyer, the Su Wanning who has never lost a case in court. My heart beat calmly and powerfully in my chest, blood carrying ice-cold rationality through every limb and bone. Panic, jealousy, heartbreak, those emotions, after the initial shock, had long been pressed down to the deepest ocean floor. Now, this is my court. I slowly lifted the teacup beside me, the scalding tea spilling over my fingertips, yet I seemed not to notice. In the dead silence, I finally spoke, my voice deliberately strained into trembling and fear, with just the right hint of a choked sob. Mother, Your Grace the Duke. I didn't look at Liu Yi, as if she didn't exist at all. My gaze only shifted between Lu Yan and the Grand Madam, terrified and helpless. Mother's lecture is right, daughter-in-law. Daughter-in-law dare not be jealous. Lu Yan's brow seemed to relax ever so slightly. I took a deep breath, as if mustering tremendous resolve, the rims of my eyes instantly turning red, tears swirling in my sockets, yet stubbornly refusing to fall. Daughter-in-law was just thinking about something. I lowered my voice even more, as if telling some terrifying secret, I remember. Isn't there a clause in the laws of Great Zhou? I paused, looking at Lu Yan timidly, as if seeking confirmation from him. Daughters of convicted officials shall never be registered as family members of the imperial clan or high-ranking nobles. A thunderous boom. I clearly saw Lu Yan's pupils contract sharply. In the Grand Madam's eyes, which had been as still as an ancient well, a hint of true coldness finally surfaced. Liu Yi's crying came to an abrupt halt. I didn't give them time to react, as if frightened by my own words. My hand trembled and the teacup crashed to the ground with a clatter, shards of porcelain scattering everywhere. Ah! I let out a startled cry and knelt down in panic, tears finally bursting forth like a broken dam. Mother. Duke, daughter-in-law didn't mean to offend. Daughter-in-law was just scared. Miss Lu's father was personally designated as a traitor by His Majesty back then. If it were just taking in an ordinary woman, your daughter-in-law would have no objections. But Miss Lu's identity, if the censorate finds out and impeaches the Duke for associating with the descendant of a convicted minister, for contempt of imperial authority. Then, I didn't continue speaking, just prostrated myself on the ground, my shoulders trembling violently, letting out desperate, suppressed sobs. If because of this matter the Duke's manor's century-old reputation is tarnished, and the Duke's future prospects are affected, then even 10,000 deaths would not absolve me of my guilt. Every word dripping with blood, every sentence piercing the heart. I didn't mention love, didn't mention betrayal, didn't even mention my own grievances. I only mentioned his future prospects. I only mentioned the Zhengguo Duke's manor's century-old reputation. This was their only weakness. The entire main hall fell into a deathly silence. Even that annoying sandalwood scent seemed to fade away. I knelt on the cold floor, burying my face deep into the crook of my arm. No one could see that beneath that shadow, the corners of my lips were slowly curling into a cold, victorious arc. Lu Yan, this battle has only just begun. At the hour of Z, the night watchman's clapper sounded from afar, thudding dully upon the hearts of every sleepless soul. My door was pushed open from the outside. No announcement, no footsteps. Like a ghost, silently intruding into my territory. I didn't look up, my fingertips turning the pages, not even a flutter of my eyelashes. The only one who could be this brazen in this Duke's residence was Lu Yan. No one else. A scent mixed with the chill of night dew and a faint hint of wine hit me as he stopped before my desk. The shadow of his figure, like a small mountain, enveloped me within, even dimming the candlelight. Done making a scene. His voice was 3 degrees colder than the chill of this late night. I finally raised my eyes slowly, gazing into those bottomless eyes of his. Gone was the evasion of daytime, leaving only condescending scrutiny and a trace of anger at being defied. Why would the Duke say such a thing? This concubine was quite frightened today. My heart is still pounding even now. I pressed my hand to my chest, putting on an appearance of frailty and helplessness. He let out a scornful laugh, the sound filled with undisguised mockery. Su Wanong, put away that pretentious act of yours. He leaned down, both hands braced on my desk, trapping me between him and the chair. I never knew my wife had such a sharp tongue, even able to cite the laws of Great Zhou. That oppressive feeling nearly suffocated me. But I knew I couldn't back down. This concubine is merely speaking of facts. What a speaking of facts, he acted as if he'd heard the greatest joke, straightening up and pacing a couple of steps. You think by threatening me with the Duke's manor's reputation, I'd have no way to deal with you. He turned around, his gaze sharp as a blade. I've already purchased a separate residence in the west of the city for Yi. She'll move there tomorrow. This matter ends here. He spoke so casually, as if he were granting me some tremendous favor. If you behave yourself and continue being your virtuous and magnanimous duchess, your dignity, your honored Zan, I won't shortchange you one bit. But if you dare pull any more tricks, he didn't finish. But the unspoken threat was more chilling than if he'd said it outright. I understood. He hadn't compromised at all. He'd just pulled that thorn out of the manor and hidden it somewhere I couldn't see. He wanted me to swallow my broken teeth along with my blood and still be grateful to him. Why should I? I lowered my eyelids, my long lashes hiding all my emotions. When I looked up again, my eyes were already rimmed with red, my voice carrying endless grievance and submission. Yes, this concubine understands. I stood up, walked before him, and curtsied. That posture was humble down to the dust. This concubine was confused today and offended the Duke. Please, please don't be angry with me. Lu Yan watched my instantly softened attitude, a trace of expected satisfaction flickering in his eyes. In his view, women ultimately had to depend on men to survive, and with a little pressure, they would come to accept reality. It is late, my lord. Have you had dinner yet? I looked up at him, my eyes full of adoration and cautious eagerness to please. How about letting this concubine personally cook for you? Making you a bowl of your favorite plain noodles. Consider it. This concubine's apology to you. He was clearly stunned for a moment, perhaps not expecting me to be so docile. In the end, his tense jawline slowly relaxed. All right. A single word, carrying the magnanimity of a victor. In the small kitchen, the candlelight flickered. I rolled up my sleeves and kneaded the dough myself. Flour covered my hands and got on my cheeks too, making me look somewhat disheveled, but I didn't care at all. My trusted maid Queer stood beside me, watching me with worry. Madam, why must you put yourself through this? I said nothing, just focused intently on kneading the dough in my hands again and again, as if it weren't dough. But Lu Yan's cold and heartless heart. Plain noodles. No. What I was preparing for him was a hongmen banquet. A plate of pan-fried fish burnt so black its original form was unrecognizable. A bowl of vegetable and tofu soup, so salty it could kill. And a dish of braised beef cut in uneven sizes as if gnawed by a dog. Finally, I took out a small paper packet from my sleeve and poured all of the colorless, odorless powder inside into that pot of fine daughter's red wine. That drug was obtained from an old physician who came with my dowry called Drunken Dream of Life and Death. Non-toxic, it merely causes hallucinations, amplifying the deepest obsessions in one's heart 100-fold, making them act out in utter disgrace. I personally carried the food and wine into the room. Lu Yan had already changed into casual clothes and was reclining on the couch with his eyes closed, resting. Duke, the meal is ready. My voice was so gentle it could drip water. He opened his eyes and looked at the dishes on the table with their tragic appearance, his brows furrowing almost imperceptibly. I hurriedly explained, "It has been a long time since I cooked. My hands are rusty. Please forgive me for making a fool of myself, Duke." As I spoke, I poured him a full cup of wine, offered it with both hands, my eyes flowing with affection, but my heart is sincere. I only hope the Duke won't despise it. Perhaps it was the beauty under lamplight, perhaps it was the fine wine before him, or perhaps my obedience pleased him. In the end, Lu Yan still took the wine cup and drained it in one gulp. You're thoughtful. He barely touched his chopsticks, only drinking cup after cup of wine. I kept pouring wine for him, watching that pot of drunken dreams reach the bottom. His gaze began to grow hazy. An abnormal flush crept up his cheeks, and his breathing became heavy. Water, water, he murmured. I poured him a cup of tea, but he swept it aside. The scalding tea splashed all over my hand, and I gasped in pain. Yet he didn't notice at all. He staggered to his feet and grabbed my wrist, his grip so strong it felt like he was about to crush my bones. Yi. His eyes were bloodshot, staring fixedly at me. Yet the name that left his lips was another woman's. Yi, don't be scared. I won't let you suffer any wrongings. No one can bully you. In that instant, I felt as if my heart had been plunged into an ice cellar. Very good, Lu Yan. You brought this upon yourself, enduring the searing pain in my wrist, and the disgust welling up inside me. I shot a look at Quier, who had been waiting outside the door. Quier immediately understood and supported the swaying Lu Yan, saying to me with an anxious expression, "Madam, the Duke is drunk. There is still the elegant gathering at the Orchid Pavilion tonight, and several of the Duke's colleagues are waiting. What should we do?" I pulled my wrist free. Zan. It had turned purple from his grip, and my voice cold without a trace of warmth. The Duke is troubled by love, his heart heavy with gloom. Going to the Orchid Pavilion gathering to drown his sorrows in wine and compose poetry is quite the refined affair. All of you, serve him well. I deliberately emphasized the words serve him. A glint flashed in Quier's eyes as she lowered her head and replied, "Yes, madam." Several clever servants supported Lu Yan Zan dead drunk, and still mumbling yi yi incoherently Zan as they quietly slipped out through the side gate of the Duke's mansion. I stood by the window, watching their figures disappear into the night, slowly stroking my scalded, reddened hand. This bit of pain, what does it even count for? The real show won't start until the sun rises tomorrow. The next day, daylight flooded in. I was sitting at the vanity, leisurely having my breakfast. Quier walked in from outside, her face bearing a strange expression, Zan wanting to laugh but not daring to. She leaned close to my ear and reported excitedly in a voice only the two of us could hear, "Madam, it is spread everywhere. The whole capital is talking about how Duke Lu Yan got drunk and made a fool of himself at the Orchid Pavilion gathering last night. All because he was troubled by love. Not only did he hug a pillar and shout ye, my heart, he also publicly recited over a dozen tooth-achingly cheesy love poems, making an utter fool of himself and becoming the biggest laughingstock among all the literati in the capital. I picked up a piece of osmanthus cake and put it in my mouth. Sweet, but not cloying. Just right. The dignity you care about most, Zan, I've torn it to shreds with my own hands. This round, we're even." On the third day, Lu Yan claimed illness and shut himself indoors. The Grand Madam sent someone to invite me. The location, Zan, still that main hall filled with the stifling scent of sandalwood. But this time, the one kneeling had changed to the Duke's Manor's head steward, Lu Chuan. Last month's procurement expenses totaled 3,200 taels. Additionally, the old master at the Lin residence and the Grand Madam's maiden family, Zan, was celebrating his birthday. As per custom, the congratulatory gifts sent were worth 800 taels in silver. And there is also the servants' monthly wages for this quarter, 1,000 taels. Madam, do you think these could perhaps? Lu Quan hunched over, sweat appearing on his forehead. Halfway through speaking, he cautiously stole a glance at the Grand Madam. I sat upright in my chair, holding a cup of warm tea in my hands, not even lifting my eyelids once. Only when he finished did I leisurely take a sip of tea, gently set the teacup down, producing a crisp clack. "Steward Liu, this servant is here. Let me ask you." I finally raised my eyes to look at him, my gaze calm and still. "How much dowry did my mother prepare for me back then?" Liu Chuan froze, not knowing why I asked this, but still answered honestly, "To answer, madam. The Su family prepared a dowry stretching 10 miles for you back then. In the capital alone, there were 27 shops, 800 acres of fertile farmland in the outskirts, silk estates in Jiangnan, and countless tea mountains. Truly the finest in the capital." "Very good." I nodded. "In the 2 years since I married into the Duke's manor, has my dowry ever been used to buy myself so much as a single hairpin or a bolt of fabric?" Lu Quan's cold sweat came pouring down in an instant. He stammered and stuttered, unable to utter a single word for the longest time, because everyone knew perfectly well that my dowry, rich enough to rival a nation, had long since become the Zhengguo Duke's private treasury. From the Grand Madam supporting her maiden family, to Lu Yan rewarding his subordinates, Dan, all of it was spent with my money. Even that villa of Lu Yi's in the west of the city was bought with my lifeblood. Enough. The Grand Madam on her seat finally spoke. Her voice cold. Those shrewd and cutting eyes of hers fell upon me like a hawk. Sue, are you trying to settle accounts with me today? I slowly rose to my feet, walked to the center of the hall, and gave her a graceful bow and my posture respectful. Yet my words yielded not an inch. Please calm your anger, mother. Your daughter-in-law wouldn't dare. It is just that the Duke's manor has enormous expenses, with such a vast estate to manage. Your daughter-in-law is too slow-witted and truly doesn't know how to handle it all. Why not, starting from today, separate my personal dowry from the Duke Manor's accounts? I raised my head, looked directly into her shocked gaze, and smiled faintly. First, to prevent any more muddled accounts with unclear expenses from tarnishing the Duke's Manor's good name. Second, your daughter-in-law also wishes to learn to manage the estates, to share the Duke's burdens. Isn't this part of a wife's duty? I threw the word duty she had used to pressure me last time right back at her, unchanged. The Grand Madame's face instantly turned livid. She stared at me fixedly, as if trying to bore a hole through my face. But I simply looked back at her, quietly and calmly. In the end, she squeezed out a few words through gritted teeth. As you wish. I won. The first step was to take back everything that should have belonged to me. My study was no longer filled with poetry and verses, but with mountains of ledgers and land deeds. Under the lamplight, I flipped through page by page, and that passion belonging to a modern entrepreneur was slowly reviving within me. The Su family was a major silk household in Jiangnan, and in my dowry alone, the silk estates and fabric shops made up half the fortune. But this wasn't enough. What I wanted was not to maintain, but to innovate. 3 days later, at Jingxiu Pavilion, the largest fabric shop under the Su family's name, I summoned all the managers from every branch in the capital. The head manager, Manager Qian, was an elder who had watched me grow up. Seeing me come in person, he was both surprised and worried. Eldest Miss. Oh no, madam, why have you come in person? For such matters, just give this old servant a word. Uncle Qian, I smiled, gesturing for him to sit down. I've gathered everyone here today because I want to show you something new. I had Queer unfold the bolt of fabric we had brought. In an instant, the entire room was stunned. It was a bolt of moon-white brocade that, under the candlelight, actually gave off a faint halo like clouds and mist, light and thin as gauze, yet with the texture of silk. Running a hand over it, it was so silky smooth it seemed to have no weight at all. What kind of fabric is this? I've never seen anything like it, one of the shopkeepers exclaimed. This brocade, I've named it Cloud Gleam Brocade. My fingertips gently brushed over the shimmering fabric, my voice carrying absolute confidence. It uses a new weaving method, 30% lighter than the finest shoe brocade on the market, yet 50% more resilient, and most importantly, no matter how you crumple it, it won't wrinkle. In front of everyone, I roughly crumpled that magnificent brocade into a ball, then let go. The brocade slid down like water, instantly returning to smoothness, without leaving a single crease. All the shopkeepers drew in a sharp breath, their eyes changed from initial surprise to fervent excitement. As merchants, they understood better than anyone what this thing meant. Uncle Qian, I want you to immediately stop production of all other brocades and focus entirely on weaving Cloud Gleam Brocade. The first batch, dye only 6 colors, and produce only 30 bolts of each. Madam, isn't this too little? It is not enough to sell. That is exactly what I want, Zan, not enough to sell. I smiled slightly. Scarcity creates value. Also, I have a few designs here. Take them, find the best craftsmen in the capital, and have them make these things for me using cloud silk. What I took out were several handbag design sketches. There were small and exquisite clutches, crossbody saddlebags, and uniquely shaped bucket bags. Each one far surpassed the dull pouch designs of this era, combining both beauty and practicality. These items are called handbags. I want every noble lady in the capital to understand one thing, Zan. My voice echoed clearly in everyone's ears. Going out to a banquet without a cloud silk handbag that matches your dress is an embarrassing thing. Shopkeeper Qian stared at those never-before-seen designs, listening to my earth-shattering words, completely stunned. After a long moment he slapped his thigh hard, his eyes bursting with unprecedented brilliance. Madam, no, boss. You're a business genius. Half a month later, as I leisurely sat by the window drinking tea, Queer reported the battle situation in the capital to me with an excited smile. Madam, you should have seen it. Now that cloud silk is truly impossible to get. I heard it has been bid up to 300 taels of silver per bolt on the black market. And that lover's knot handbag you designed, Zan Princess Anning used it once at the flower viewing banquet. And the very next day, all the noble ladies in the capital went crazy. I smiled slightly, as expected. Queer lowered her voice again and said with glee, there is one more thing. I heard that the mansion's accounts are almost out of money. Steward Liu is so anxious he has got blisters on his lips. The silver the Grand Madam sends to support her maiden family this month is 1,000 taels more than last month. I picked up my teacup, looking at the garden outside the window that I had carefully tended Zan full of life. Yet this magnificent duke's mansion was like a towering tree hollowed out from within, rotting bit by bit from its roots. What I held in my hands was the first golden wing I had forged myself. Though still fledgling, one day it would carry me out of this cage. Mother Han Xin. He was so powerful, why was he still killed in the end? My son, Lu Xingxi, tilted up that little face 70% similar to Lu Yan's, his clear eyes filled with complete trust and confusion. His tiny hand was wrapped in my palm, warm and soft. At this moment, we weren't sitting stiffly in the study, reciting those classical texts. We sat on the soft couch under the corridor, enjoying the evening summer breeze, watching the newly bloomed hollyhocks in the courtyard, and what I just finished telling him was the story of When the Cunning Rabbit Dies. The hunting dog gets cooked. Ever since Lu Yan claimed illness and stopped going out, I dismissed that old tutor who only knew how to make the child memorize things by rote, and personally took over teaching Xingxi. I no longer forced him to get up before dawn to study, no longer used a ruler to make him copy scriptures 100 times. I told him about the rise and fall of past dynasties, about the battlefield stories of famous generals throughout history, about the arts of emperors, and also about the wisdom of common folk. At first, this child of only 6 years old was timid and uneasy. He was used to his father's strictness and his mother's distance, and approached my sudden closeness with cautious probing. He would sneak glances at me, and when I tucked in his blanket corners, his body would stiffen like a little wooden board. But now, he would take my hand on his own initiative, rest his head on my knee, and ask me all sorts of questions. Because I looked into his eyes and spoke each word with exceptional clarity. His achievements were too great, and it scared the emperor. Xingxi, you must remember, in this world, the most unreliable thing is the human heart. But, father said, the bonds between ruler and subject, father and son, are the natural order and moral principles. He rebutted in a small voice. Clearly, what Lu Yan had taught him before was an entirely different set of things. Natural order is defined by the strong. Moral principles are used to bind the weak. I didn't shy away, but gave him an even crueler answer. When your power threatens the one who sets the rules, he will do everything in his power to destroy you. He nodded, half understanding, and firmly committed my words to heart. Just then, an unfamiliar face dressed in the attire of a second-rank maidservant walked in, carrying a plate of delicate pastries. Madam, young master, these are calming cakes that Miss Liu from the Western Manor specially had someone deliver. She said she heard the young master has been studying hard lately, so she made these specially for you. They have a calming and soothing effect. The maidservant kept her eyes lowered submissively, but her voice carried a hint of shrewdness. The smile at the corner of my lips faded. Lu Yi. She finally couldn't hold back and reached her hand toward my child. Xingxi was still a child after all. When he smelled that sweet fragrance, his eyes lit up, and he instinctively reached out to grab one. I held down his hand. Smells so good. I looked at the plate of pastries made as white as jade, and said to the maidservant with a smile. Miss Liu is truly thoughtful. I just wonder, What good things were put in these pastries to make them smell so unusually fragrant? The maidservant obviously hadn't expected me to ask this. She froze for a moment before hurriedly answering. To answer, madam. It is just some common Chinese yam and poria both for calming the nerves. Oh, I drew out my tone. Queer, didn't you tell me a few days ago that among your family's traditional medicine, there is an herb called drunken immortal grass, colorless and tasteless, that when added to food in small amounts can calm the nerves. But if taken long term, it will make one's mind sluggish and gradually turn them into a fool. Queer immediately stepped forward, coldly looking at the little maidservant. Madam jests. How would this servant understand such things? However, this servant's nose happens to be sharper than most. These pastries, aside from poria and Chinese yam, seem to have an extra ingredient, the scent of rotted branch leaves. Rotted branch leaves. At some point a plainly dressed maidservant had appeared beside me. She was the daughter of a pharmacy manager from my dowry, named Yinxing, most proficient in pharmacology. At this moment, she was picking up a small piece of pastry, lightly sniffing it at the tip of her nose. Rotted branch leaves grow alongside drunken immortal grass. Their scents are extremely similar. Consumed alone it is harmless. But if eaten together with poria, it will produce a slow-acting poison. Accumulated over time, it is enough to destroy a child's mind. Yingxing's voice wasn't loud yet, every word struck like thunder. The little maidservant who delivered the pastries, her face turned deathly pale as paper with a whoosh. Her legs gave way, and she collapsed to the ground, trembling like chaff being sifted. This servant knows nothing. It was Miss Liu who told this servant to deliver them. It has nothing to do with this servant. I didn't look at her again. My gaze fell upon my son. Xingxi's little face had also turned pale. He wasn't a fool. He understood. He stared fixedly at that plate of beautiful pastries, as if they weren't delicacies, but venomous snakes waiting to devour their prey. I held him tightly in my arms, gently patting his back. Xingxi, are you scared? He buried his face in my chest and let out a muffled, his body still trembling slightly. Being scared is right. My voice was cold and quiet. Today, Mother will teach you the second lesson. Those who harm you won't always have monstrous faces. Sometimes, she'll offer you the sweetest pastries and smile at you most gently. I cupped his face and made him look into my eyes. So, never easily trust anyone. Especially those who are attentive for no reason. You must learn to tell whose smile is real and whose smile is fake, whose candy is sweet and whose candy is coated with poison. I pointed at the plate of pastries on the ground, pointed at the maidservant who couldn't stop trembling, and told him, "This is the human heart." That day, Lu Xingqi remained silent in my arms for a very, very long time. I knew that a seed called vigilance had already taken root and sprouted in his young heart, and I would personally nurture it into a towering tree. In this man-eating duke's mansion, only this way could he survive. Mother, quick, quick. Save him. I was going over the accounts of Jingshu Pavilion for this month when the study door was suddenly slammed open from outside. My son, Lu Xingxi, his usually calm little face was now filled with panic and helplessness. Behind him, two servants carried a makeshift stretcher, on which lay a boy covered in blood, his fate unknown. A thick smell of blood instantly overwhelmed the ink fragrance that had filled the room. My heart went thump, and the ledger in my hands dropped to the ground with a slap. What happened? I quickly stepped forward, and the first thing I did was pull the trembling Xingxi into my arms to check if he was hurt. Mother, I'm fine. Xingxi's small hands clutched my sleeve tightly. Pointing at the boy on the stretcher, we went horseback riding at West Mountain today, and found him at the bottom of the ravine. He fell from really high up, and there was so much blood. I felt a wave of relief and immediately regained my composure, issuing orders methodically. Choir, go fetch the best trauma doctor in the city immediately. Yingxing, go check on his injuries first. Everyone else, carry him to the West Wing and prepare hot water and clean cloths. In an instant, the entire courtyard sprang into action, busy yet orderly. I held Sinxie's hand and followed behind the stretcher. The boy appeared to be around 12 or 13 years old, dressed in fine silk. Even though his clothes were now torn and covered in mud, it couldn't hide that air of nobility. His complexion was white as paper, his lips cracked, his eyes tightly shut. When Yingxing was examining his wounds, a jade pendant fell out from his chest. It was a fine piece of Hedian jade, with a flamboyantly written character carved in relief Zan. My pupils contracted sharply. Surnamed Gi. A boy pushed off a cliff. In my mind, it was like a bolt of lightning flashed through, instantly connecting all the clues together. I immediately leaned down and asked Sinxie gently, "Sinxie, tell mother, were there any other people around when you found him?" Sinxie tried hard to recall then, shook his head. No, he was lying alone in the stream, his forehead was bleeding, and his leg seemed to be broken. I understood. This was no accident. This was a carefully planned murder. And my son, by a twist of fate, had saved the one person who was least supposed to die in this murder. The future Grand Secretary. Gu Qingzhe, who would hold power over the entire court, and his one and only blood brother, Gu Qingming. An hour later, the physician had finished treating the wounds. Fortunately, Gu Qingming had only broken his leg, and although the wound on his forehead looked frightening, it hadn't injured anything vital. Meanwhile, a visitor had arrived at the gate of the Duke's residence. "Madam, there is a Lord Gu at the door who claims to be a compiler from the Hanlin Academy, here to pay a visit." I took a deep breath, knowing the main player had arrived. "Please show him to the main hall and serve him tea." I changed into an elegant and simple dress. When I walked into the main hall, a young man in a cyan official robe was standing with his back to me, in front of a landscape painting. He was slender yet stood ramrod straight, like a stalk of green bamboo that would rather snap than bend. Hearing the footsteps, he slowly turned around. It was an extraordinarily handsome face, with features like a painting and a gentle temperament. But those eyes were as deep as a cold pool, and so sharp they seemed able to see right through one's heart. "This humble official Gu Qingji greets the Duchess." He cupped his hands in salute, neither servile nor overbearing. "Lord Gu, no need for such formalities." I returned the courtesy and got straight to the point. "Your brother's injuries have stabilized, but he lost too much blood and still needs rest." In Gu Qingji's eyes, usually as calm as an ancient well, there was finally a ripple of emotion. He looked at me deeply, then solemnly made a long, deep bow. "The Gu family will never forget the life-saving grace of Madam and the young master. It was nothing, not worth mentioning." I personally poured him a cup of tea and pushed it before him. "Lord Gu, saving people is simply one's duty. But sometimes, how to let the person you've saved live on in peace, and that is the bigger challenge." My words carried a deeper meaning. Gu Qingzhe's hand lifting the teacup paused in mid-air for a moment. He raised his eyes, that sharp gaze, looking straight at me. "What does Madam mean by this?" "Nothing in particular." I picked up my own teacup, gently blowing at the floating tea leaves. "I just feel that your younger brother is truly blessed with great fortune. Such a high cliff, yet he managed to survive by sheer luck. I suppose even the heavens couldn't stand by and watch someone's filthy, vicious schemes." In the main hall, dead silence, the air seemed to have frozen solid. After a long while, Gu Qingzhe slowly set down his teacup, his voice carrying a hint of icy hoarseness. "I've made a fool of myself before, Madam. The family has been unfortunate. If there is misfortune, one must fight back." I cut off his words. Staring straight at him, I've heard an old saying, that a gentleman's revenge is never too late, even after 10 years. He nodded, his gaze somber. "Only through patience and lying low can one accomplish things." "No." I shook my head and smiled. "I think this saying is only half right. A true gentleman sharpens his blade while lying low, waiting for the moment to deliver a killing blow. If one only knows how to endure but not how to strike back, that is not called a gentleman." Zan, that is called a coward. My words, like a massive boulder, smashed hard into that seemingly calm, cold pool of his. On Guqingzhi's face for the first time appeared complete, undisguised shock. He stared at me fixedly, as if looking at a monster. Meeting his gaze, I threw out my bargaining chip. Lord Gu, that concubine-born stepmother of yours has managed the household for years. Her accounts, I imagine, aren't exactly clean. I have a few shops under my name, with some informants in my employ. Perhaps I could help you find some things you've always wanted to find, but never could. You, his Adam's apple bobbed, his voice strained. What does Madam want? I want nothing, I smiled faintly. And in that smile was the same calm and rationality as his. I just want to make a friend. A friend who repays kindness without fail, and repays grudges without fail as well. I only hope that today I'm offering Lord Gu charcoal in the snow, and someday, if I'm in need, Lord Gu won't stand idly by. Gu Qingzhi fell silent. He looked at me for a very, very long time. That gaze shifted from initial shock to scrutiny, to contemplation, and finally, transformed into a deep understanding. He finally stood up, no longer bowing in supplication, but straightening his robes and giving me the most solemn alliance salute between equals. Su Wanning. He called my name. Your kindness and wisdom, Zan Guqingzhi, will never dare forget them in this lifetime. Watching his retreating figure as he turned to leave, I knew that upon my golden wings there was now a tailwind. A powerful tailwind. From the future imperial court, clanged Zan. A crisp sound of porcelain shattering pierced the afternoon tranquility sharply. Right after, came the ice-cold, blade-sharp shout from my most capable maid, Yingxing. Seize her. There is poison in the medicine. I was so startled that I stood up from the daybed, the book in my hands slipping to the ground. When I rushed into the side hall, what I saw was a young maidservant being pinned firmly to the ground by Yingxing. And at her feet was a puddle of dark brown medicinal liquid, and a silver needle for testing poison. Lying quietly in the liquid, its tip already pitch black as ink. That was the herbal medicine I had prepared for Xingxi to regulate his stomach. My blood in an instant ran half cold. No, not from fear. From excitement. The fish had finally taken the bait. I trembled all over, my face deathly pale. As if all my strength had been drained away, I staggered back a step, pointing at that maidservant, my voice shaking beyond recognition. You. Who are you? Who sent you? That young maidservant was already scared out of her wits. How could she withstand such a scene, before any torture was even used? She confessed everything through her sobs and cries. It is Miss Liu from the villa in the west of the city. It was Miss Liu who ordered this servant to do it. I was struck as if by lightning, my body swaying. If not for Choir's quick hands catching me, I would have almost collapsed to the ground. No, impossible. I murmured to myself, my eyes full of disbelief. Quickly go summon the Duke and the Grand Madam, hurry. The main hall of the Duke of Zhengguo's manor, once again, became a courtroom for judgment. Only this time, the atmosphere was truly tense, with killing intent lurking everywhere. Liu Yan and the Grand Madam sat upright at the head, their expressions one grimmer than the other. Liu Yi had been invited over from the west of the city, kneeling in the hall, crying her heart out. I didn't do it. Brother Yan, I really didn't. How could I ever harm Xingxi? She cried and tried to grab the hem of Liu Yan's robe, but he dodged her with a cold face. That maid who did the poisoning had already spilled everything. How Liu Yi had bribed her, how she had handed her a small paper packet, instructing her to slip it into the young master's medicinal soup without anyone noticing. Witnesses and physical evidence were all present. Liu Yi's defense seemed so pale and powerless. The Grand Madam's eyes already carried killing intent, plotting to harm the Duke's manor's only legitimate grandson Zan. This was a monstrous crime worthy of 10,000 deaths. Liu Yan's face was also full of disappointment and painful struggle. I hadn't said a word the whole time. I just held my son Xingxi tightly, Like a mother beast protecting her cub, my whole body trembling, tears silently streaming down, portraying a mother's terror, lingering fear, and heartbreak to perfection. Only when Lu Yan was about to give the order to drag Lu Yie away for thorough interrogation did I finally speak up. My voice, hoarse and weak, everyone's gaze focused on me. I held Xingqi in my arms, step by step, walking up to Lu Yi. I looked down at her from above. The emotions in my eyes were struggle and pity that none of them could understand. Madam, I slowly spoke, my voice carrying a tearful tone. I don't believe it. I don't believe Sister Yi would do such a thing. She is so frail, so kind. She'd be sad for half a day just from stepping on an ant. How could she bear to lay such a cruel hand on a child? Liu Yi suddenly raised her head as if grasping at the last straw, a gleam of hope bursting forth in her eyes. Lu Yan's brows also furrowed. I paid them no mind, just continued speaking as if talking to myself. Each word like a precise scalpel dissecting everyone's psychology. Unless she didn't really want to harm Xingxi. She just wanted Xingxi to get a little sick, right? This question of mine came out of nowhere. But Liu Yi's crying suddenly stopped. I turned my head looking at the madam on the high seat, my eyes fearful and uneasy. Mother, this daughter-in-law remembers, just a few days ago you scolded me, saying Xingxi was too close to me and had lost the sharpness a boy should have. You said, boys, after all, need to spend more time with their father to learn responsibility. The madam's expression slightly changed. I immediately turned my gaze back to Liu Yi. This time, my voice dropped even lower, carrying a hint of patient, coaxing understanding, and a hint of implication that only she could understand. Sister Yi, tell me honestly, were you just trying to make Xingxi a bit more ill, so the Duke would feel sorry for him and come spend more time with him? Was it? The old madam felt bad for the Duke, thought we mother and son were estranged from him, so she had you come up with this foolish idea, to make Xingxi long for his father while sick. Hurry up and say it. I suddenly raised my voice as if eager to clear her name. You weren't trying to poison him. You just did something foolish. Trying to use this method to mend the father-son relationship between the Duke and Xingxi. Isn't that right? I gave her a perfect way out. A way out that could turn the capital crime of murdering the legitimate grandson into a minor household mistake of petty jealousy with clumsy methods. Liu Yi was no fool. She almost immediately understood my good intentions. In her desperate eyes, a glimmer of survival suddenly burst forth. She gave up her futile excuses and instead scrambled desperately up the path I had laid out for her. Yes, yes, she cried even louder. But it was no longer denial, Zan, it was repentance, sister. You understand me best. I really didn't mean it. It was Mother who said that because of you, the Duke doesn't even care about his son anymore. I only came up with this stupid idea. I just wanted the Duke to come see the child more often. I really didn't mean to harm him. I was wrong, Brother Yan. I was truly wrong. She had successfully and firmly pinned the blame right on the Grand Madame's head. You bitch. What nonsense are you spouting? The Grand Madame couldn't sit still any longer. She shot to her feet, pointing at Liu Yi, trembling with rage. She never imagined that her most favored daughter-in-law would, at this critical moment, turn around and bite back at her. As for Liu Yan, he was completely frozen. He looked at his furious mother, looked at his beloved crying and repenting, then looked at the one in my arms, his own biological son, whose little face had gone deathly pale from fright, clinging tightly to me and refusing to let go. His face showed nothing but utter confusion, doubt, and anguish. He no longer knew who to believe, and me. This was exactly the result I wanted. Enough. Liu Yan finally erupted with a furious roar. He didn't punish anyone. He just wearily waved his hand, had someone take Liu Yi back to the side residence and put her under house arrest, said a few words to pacify the Grand Madame, then fled, as if escaping from this suffocating den of strife. A major case of plotting against the legitimate grandson just fizzled out like that. But I knew, once the dam of trust cracks, it can never be repaired. I held Singsi, and from an angle he couldn't see, slowly curled the corners of my lips. Liu Yi's poison was put in the medicine. But my poison was planted in the hearts of all of them. Midnight, thunder. I was awakened by a frantic knocking, one that nearly shattered the door. "Madam, something's wrong, madam." Outside the door was the butler Liu Chuan, his voice hoarse as if scraped by sandpaper, the West City villa. "Miss Liu Shi. She is bleeding. She is probably going into labor." In my heart, everything was crystal clear. What was meant to come had finally arrived. I got up as fast as I could. Quier and Yingxing dressed me with solemn faces. In the mirror, I was pale as a ghost, my eyes filled with deliberately feigned panic. "Quick! Prepare the carriage." The West City villa was brightly lit, yet deathly still. The air was thick with an overwhelming smell of blood. The door to the birthing room was tightly shut, Liu Yi's suppressed, agonized moans rising and falling, like ghostly claws scratching at everyone's hearts. Basin after basin of bloody water was carried out by ashen-faced maids, splashed onto the snow in the courtyard, instantly melting shocking bloody holes. Lu Yan paced restlessly back and forth under the corridor, like a beast trapped in a cage. His handsome face was covered in sweat and anxiety. The Grand Madam sat in a chair not far away, eyes closed, the prayer beads in her hands spinning rapidly. When I arrived, this was the hellish scene that greeted me. "Mother, Your Grace." I curtsied in greeting, my voice carrying just the right amount of concern. "How is Sister Yi doing?" Lu Yan glanced at me, his gaze incredibly complex in impatience, suspicion, and a hint of dependence he himself hadn't even noticed. At a moment like this, my composure as his lawful wife became the only driftwood he could cling to. The midwife said, "The baby's positioned wrong. There might be risk of hemorrhaging." His voice was utterly dry and hoarse. I said nothing more, just quietly stood to the side, playing the role of a sensible, big-picture-minded duchess. Time slipped away, second by second, amid the heart-wrenching screams. Finally, as dawn approached, those agonizing moans transformed into one piercing shriek. Then, utter silence. A deathly stillness. Lu Yan's body went rigid. Just as everyone's hearts sank to rock bottom, a faint yet unmistakably clear baby's cry pierced the darkness before dawn. Wei Zan. Alive. Everyone let out a breath of relief. The birthing room door creaked open with a creak, and the exhausted midwife walked out beaming, holding a swaddled bundle. "Congratulations, Your Grace." "Congratulations, Duke. Mother and child are safe." It is a little young master weighing 7 jin. Lu Yan's face, tense throughout the night, was instantly washed over with wild joy. He practically rushed over, his eagerness like that of a traveler who had trekked through the desert for 3 days and nights and finally spotted an oasis. Quickly bring him here for me to see, my son." With trembling hands, he reached toward the swaddling cloth. I smiled too, following along, my steps light, my demeanor gentle. "Yes, let me have a look too. This child must look just like the Duke." My tone was full of the magnanimity and joy befitting a legal wife. Just as Lu Yan's hand was about to touch the swaddling cloth, I inadvertently tripped on a slightly raised stone slab beneath my feet. "Oh my!" I cried out in alarm, my body tilting forward. To steady myself, my hands instinctively reached toward the swaddling cloth in the midwife's arms, and my fingertips, just so coincidentally, brushed aside the soft brocade blanket covering the baby's face. We happened to be walking under the corridor eaves, beside a lantern that had burned all night. That orange-yellow, bright light, without any obstruction, illuminated the newborn baby's tiny face. It also illuminated his eyes, which had just opened. What an eerie pair of eyes they were. Not the murky deep blue of a newborn infant, nor the ink black or dark brown common among the people of Dezhou. They were a pair of light gray eyes, like the finest smoky quartz, clear, cold, with a metallic sheen. In that instant, all sounds in the entire world disappeared. The wind stopped. The snow stopped. Everyone's breathing stopped. The smile on the midwife's face froze at the corners of her lips. The prayer beads in the grand madam's hands, with a snap, broke their string, scattering all over the floor. Liu Yan's outstretched hand just froze there in midair, the wild joy on his face, shattered inch by inch, turning into utter, disbelieving horror. I was the first one to react. I sharply sucked in a breath of cold air, pressing my handkerchief tightly over my mouth. In my eyes was just the right amount of shock and panic. Then, I immediately seemed to realize my loss of composure, frantically, desperately trying to cover up for him. I hurriedly pulled the brocade quilt back over, my voice trembling, explaining incoherently. Perhaps it is because the child was just born. The color of the eyes hasn't fully developed yet. Yes. It must be so. My voice, not loud yet, like a heavy hammer, slammed hard onto Liu Yan's heart. This, the more you try to hide, the more it shows act of mine, was 10,000 times more deadly than any direct accusation. He didn't move, his whole being like a weathered stone statue. I walked to his side, stood on tiptoe, and with a voice only the two of us could hear, plunged the final knife into his already battered heart. My voice was filled with worry and concern. Duke, please don't overthink it. I just suddenly remembered. After Sister Liu's father was convicted, she was exiled to the northern lands. That place was only a wall away from the northern Dai people. The sandstorms there must have been quite fierce. Boom, Zanzan. I clearly saw that the last glimmer of light in Liu Yan's eyes had completely extinguished. What replaced it was suspicion, fear, murderous madness, and overwhelming humiliation enough to burn himself along with it. His cherished firstborn son had now become a colossal joke, a thunderbolt that could drag the entire Duke's manor into an abyss of no return. Ever since that child was born, the Duke's manor had become a true hell. However glamorous and bustling it once was, it was now equally lifeless and desolate. Liu Yan had completely changed into a different person. He was no longer that lofty, elegant duke. He had become a beast driven mad by humiliation and suspicion. Speak. Whose bastard is that exactly? You bitch. How dare you cuckold me like this? In the dead of night, I could always hear from the western courtyard the faint sounds of his furious roars and Liu Yi's shrill cries. He had imprisoned both Liu Yi and that child in that separate courtyard. Never seeing daylight, only interrogated and tortured day and night. He drank himself into a stupor, eyes bloodshot, like a gambler who had lost everything. Desperate to find an opportunity to turn things around. He needed a victory, a glorious military achievement, one that would let him stand tall again, one that would shut up the whole world. He was getting desperate, and I was waiting precisely for him to get desperate. The opportunity came soon enough. The northern D royal court was in turmoil, several princes fighting until their heads were bloodied over the Khan's throne. One of the princes had actually lost his mind and sent troops to harass our great Zhou's northern border, trying to plunder military supplies to strengthen his own forces. When the news reached the capital, the court was shaken. The emperor was furious, asking in open court who could take command of the expedition. The entire court of civil and military officials fell silent. The northern Dai were a fierce people, and it was a land of bitter cold. This battle wouldn't be easy. Just then, my ally, Gu Qingzhe, who had just been promoted to vice-censor-in-chief, stepped forward. He didn't volunteer for battle. He lavished praise on Duke Zhengguo, Liu Yan. Your Majesty, his voice was clear and powerful. This subject believes Duke Zhengguo is fit for this task. The Duke is a scion of a military family, well-versed in the art of war, and exceptionally brave. Now that those northern D clowns dare offend our imperial might, we need a fierce general like the Duke to take up his sword and spread the glory of our great Zhou. These words hit exactly what the emperor wanted, and also struck right at Liu Yan's heart. When the imperial edict came down, Liu Yan was going mad in the manor. When he received that scroll of bright yellow imperial edict, was appointed general who pacifies the north. given command of 100,000 troops, and ordered to march immediately. His whole being seemed to be injected with a shot of adrenaline, instantly coming back to life. He rushed into my courtyard, still reeking strongly of alcohol, yet his eyes burned with a sickly, fanatical gleam. Su Wanning, did you see that? His Majesty personally appointed me as the general who pacifies the North. He grabbed my shoulders, gripping so hard he nearly crushed me. When I return from the northern frontier, I will pile the heads of the northern DI into a grand skull mound. I will show everyone what kind of hero I Lu Yan am. By then, who would still dare to point fingers at me behind my back? He had gone mad, treating this war as the only way to wash away his personal humiliation. I endured the intense pain in my shoulders, yet on my face I wore a gentle and adoring smile. I adjusted the straps of his armor for him and said softly, "The Duke's divine might is unmatched. You will surely achieve victory from the start. This concubine and Singsi will wait quietly in the manor for the Duke's triumphant return." He looked at my virtuous and gentle appearance, and finally there was a hint of satisfaction in his eyes. He thought what he was about to embark on was a path of glory. Yet he didn't know. This journey of his would be the road to the netherworld. 3 days later, at the 10-mile pavilion on the outskirts of the capital, 100,000 troops set off northward. I stood on the city tower, watching that Lu banner belonging to the Duke Zhengguo's manor fluttering loudly in the wind, growing farther and farther away, until it disappeared at the edge of my vision. The tiger had left the mountain. I didn't return to the manor. Instead, I went to the most inconspicuous tea house in the city. In the private room, Gu Qingzhe had been waiting for a long time. He was still dressed in blue robes, his expression calm. "He is gone," I said. He nodded. "I've arranged everything. Tonight at the hour of the rat, I'll present a secret memorial to His Majesty." In front of him sat a wooden box. Inside were the private letters exchanged between Lu Yi and that 7th prince of Northern Dai over the years, an ironclad proof of that child's identity. Beside it was a thick, yellowed ledger. It was the Duke Zhengguo Manor's records of secretly funding the 7th prince of Northern Dai through various covert channels. That foolish woman, the Grand Madam, was willing to sell out the country just to help her grandson ascend to the throne. Colluding with the enemy and betraying the nation. These 4 words were enough to have the entire Duke Zhengguo's manor executed. "Is this enough?" Gu Qingji asked. "Enough?" I looked at the evidence. Enough to be fatal, and said softly, "But it is still not fast enough, not ruthless enough." As I spoke, I took out another stack of things from my sleeve. Nor account books. It was the deeds and seals for all the shops, farmlands, silk stores, and money houses under my name. It was the business empire I had painstakingly built over the past 2 years. It was my entire fortune, wealthy enough to rival a nation. I gently pushed them in front of Gu Qingzhe. "Here, converted to silver, about 30 million taels." Gu Qingzhi's eyes, always calm and unruffled, revealed utter shock. He suddenly raised his head, looked at me, his voice carrying a tremor even he himself hadn't noticed. "Su Wanning, what is this?" "To fund the military provisions." My voice was calm, as if speaking of some trivial matter that had nothing to do with me. "On my behalf, present all of this together to His Majesty. Just say that an anonymous woman from the capital has given everything she has, willing to share His Majesty's burdens, to do what little she can for the Northern Expedition Army. I, Su Wanning, want no rewards, seek no titles." I stood up and bowed deeply to him. "I only ask that His Majesty, after seeing this evidence, thoroughly investigate this case and give justice to the world. I only ask that His Majesty understand that I, Su Wanning, and my son Lu Xingxi, are both victims of this case of treason and colluding with the enemy. I only ask to be able to protect us mother and son, to spare our lives. Sensen Wenlaun. To buy us mother and son, a clean name, a way out alive." Gu Qingzhe looked at me, looked at that mountain of gold on the table, and didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he stood up, facing me, solemnly, returned a bow. All right. He only said one word, yet it weighed as heavy as Mount Tai. The east wind has arrived. General Liu Yan of the North Pacifying Army, having been on campaign for less than a month, returned to the capital. Only, it was not a triumphant return. It was with 100,000 troops, on the official road 300 li from the capital, that he was stopped by the newly appointed commander of the Imperial Guard, Gu Qingzhe, who, with an imperial edict of treason and colluding with the enemy, confiscated his military tally on the spot, threw him into a prison cart, and escorted him back to the capital. When the news came, the capital was shaken. The Duke of Zhengguo's residence, with its century of glory, became overnight a den of traitors cursed by all. The mansion gates were sealed by the Imperial Guard. The Grand Madam collapsed on the spot from blood rushing to her heart, paralyzed by a stroke, and was thrown into the Imperial prison along with them. But I, Su Wanning, the only mistress of the Duke's residence, on that very day, took my son Lu Xingxi and moved out of that cage that had imprisoned me for 2 lifetimes, into an elegant residence personally bestowed by His Majesty. 3 days later I received a message from Gu Qingzhe. Liu Yan wanted to see me one last time. The Imperial Prison. This place was my first time here, and also my last. Dark, damp, the air, mixed with the stench of rotting straw, blood and despair, so thick it couldn't dissolve. I wore my most magnificent palace robes embroidered with phoenix and peony patterns, stitched by my own hands. The hem of my skirt trailing across the filthy ground, jade ornaments jingling, each step, as if treading upon the bones of the defeated. At the end of the prison cell, that man who was once so arrogant, now, like a dead dog, was shackled hand and foot by heavy iron chains, curled up in the corner. His hair was disheveled, his face covered in filth, and the prison garb he wore that was once bright, had long been worn until its color was unrecognizable. Hearing the footsteps, he slowly raised his head. When he saw clearly that it was me, in those murky eyes of his, an overwhelming hatred instantly erupted. He roared hoarsely, lunging fiercely toward me, the iron chains clanking loudly as he strained against them, yet could only send him sprawling before the cell door, a mere 3 steps away from me. You vicious woman. It was you. It was all your scheme. Wasn't it? His eyes were splitting with rage. That face that was once incomparably handsome was now twisted like a malevolent ghost from extreme fury and unwillingness. I quietly watched him. On my face, not a single ripple. I schemed against you. I laughed. That laughter, in this deathly silent prison, sounded especially crisp, and especially cruel. Liu Yan, let me ask you. Back then, it was you who, for the sake of the child in Liu Yi's belly, disregarded our bond as husband and wife, and forced me to take in a concubine. Did I push you into it? That self-righteous reputation of yours was completely ruined by your own drunken disgrace at the Lanting gathering. Was it me who forced you to drink? Your mother, in order to support her good-for-nothing grandson, secretly aided the enemy, continuously sending the Duke's mansion silver to Northern Dai. Was it me who forced her to betray the country? And then there is Liu Yi. With every sentence I spoke, I took a step closer to him, finally stopping in front of the prison door, looking down at him from above. She secretly conceived a child with the Northern Dai Prince, putting a sky-high green hat on your head. Was it me who climbed into her bed? My every word was like a knife, every sentence struck at the heart. Liu Yan's roars gradually weakened. He lay slumped there, gasping for breath heavily. In his eyes only remained bewilderment and crushing despair. No, that is not it. It was you, it was you. I have never framed you. Liu Yan. I looked at him, and in the calmest tone, pronounced his final verdict. I merely stood behind you every time you made a stupid, heartless, selfish choice and gently gave you a little push. It was you yourself, step by step with your own hands, who sent yourself into this abyss of eternal damnation. He stopped moving completely, like a clay statue that had lost all its soul. I turned around, preparing to leave. At the moment the prison door was about to close, I left him the last words of my life. Oh, right. There is one more thing. His Majesty has decreed that Lu Yi and that bastard child be secretly put to death. The Grand Madam, 3 days from now. A cup of poisoned wine. As for you, considering your father once served the nation loyally, you'll be left with an intact corpse. Dan, take your own life. The rest of the Lu family, uninvolved in this matter, will be spared. His Majesty is merciful and has issued a gracious decree that my son, Lu Xingxi, shall inherit the title. However, the title of Defender of the Nation has been stripped, demoted to Marquis of Sincerity. In the future, he will be personally mentored by the new Grand Secretary, Gu Qingji. The title you obsessed over, the glory, the Lu family's future, all still remain. It is just that from now on, none of it has anything to do with you anymore. Ah, Aish, Aish. Zan, from behind me came his complete breakdown. Zan howl like the mournful cry of a wild beast. In that voice, there was unwillingness, regret, fear of death, and above all, the ultimate shame of having lived his entire life as a joke. I didn't look back. The heavy prison door slowly closed, sealing all that filth, sin, and disgrace forever behind me. I walked out of the imperial prison. Outside, the sky was clear for miles without a single cloud. The warm winter sun shone upon me, dispelling the last trace of cold gloom. I squinted and saw 2 figures waiting not far away, one tall, one small. Mother. Xingxi broke free from Gu Qingji's hand, came running towards me, and threw himself into my arms. I held him tightly, this child whom I had barely managed to protect by exhausting all the wisdom and courage of 2 lifetimes. Gu Qingji walked slowly up to me, still dressed in cyan robes, his features gentle and warm. He looked at me. In his eyes, there was admiration, there was respect, and something I had never seen before. A hint of tenderness. It is all over, he said. I nodded and smiled. Yes, it is all over. I held Xingqi's hand, walking side by side with Gu Qingji on the bustling streets of the capital. The sunlight was just right, the breeze gentle and not dry. The shackles were shattered, the cage was broken. I, Su Wanning, from today onwards, am no longer anyone's wife, anyone's daughter-in-law, anyone's caged bird. I am simply myself. The days ahead stretch boundless as the sky and sea. This phoenix, risen from the flames through rebirth, is finally going to live for herself. Just this once.